Hi, welcome to the first episode of Horrors and Hauntings. My name is Carrie Daniels and I'm your host. This podcast will cover true stories of the paranormal, encounters with Bigfoot, all the weird stuff. Today I'm going to be sharing one of my many stories, personal experiences. Now, my mother used to joke with me and say that I was a ghost magnet. Well, actually, I was thinking a lot lately, and I'm pretty sure that my whole family was. In this episode, I'm going to be covering stories about my grandmother's house. And the title of this particular episode is Terror at Grandma's House, because that was a very scary house. I had a horrifying experience there, and I wasn't the only one. So first, I want to give you a little bit of backstories, some other stories of my family members before I get into the one that really got to me. Now, the exterior of this house was unusual to begin with. It was a big two-story house. I'm not even sure what year it was built. It was, instead of brick or wood, it was actually cinder blocks. You walked in, there was a stairway right in front of you. You walk up the stairway, there's a landing, and then you make a left turn. And in the hallway, on one side, it was just a railing, so it was like an open hallway. It went down, you turned left, and there was like a little section, an alcove, that had the wardrobe in it. And then the other side had the bedrooms. Now, when you got off the steps, on your right side, you had the bathroom, and then the hallway stopped right after that. And then to the left of that was my grandfather's room. So that's just a little basic layout of the upstairs, because a lot of the activity was upstairs. Although downstairs, it was an open floor plan. You had a big hallway, the living room and the dining room, which were separated by arches. There were no doorways. And now I've described the house, I'll give you a little backstory on the family. My grandparents rented this house. I think they were there for 26 years. The landlord's parents had died. I'm pretty sure that the mother had died in that house. Apparently she was a very, very vindictive, angry, just a mean woman. And then the husband was a big burly man, always walked around in big work boots. From what I understand, he was well over 6 foot tall. Before I really understood what was going on in that house, because they lived there before I was born, my grandparents always had the radio on downstairs, and they always had it loud, even at night. I didn't realize it was to block out the sound of heavy work boots on the hardwood floor up on the second floor. Other things that happened, I guess some of the more benign experiences, there was a rotary phone sitting in the middle of the hallway on an old dresser. Wasn't even plugged in, and you could walk by, and I've experienced this as well as everybody else. It would start dialing itself. The rocking chair in my grandmother's room that actually came with the house, so I'm assuming it was probably the wife's, would rock by itself. And I don't mean just barely, gently rock, because a window's open. My grandmother usually didn't have her window open at all, and that thing would violently rock, as if somebody was just sitting there rocking, really angry, and, you would think it was going to start flying, walking across the room. Now, okay, the first, I guess, major experience that anyone reported, my dad was there for this one. These are his parents. There was a huge mirror, probably a couple 100 pounds, that was in the basement, that was leaning up against one of the walls. Well, one day they heard their dog barking, somehow got down in the basement, was barking really loud, and just the scared type of bark, the panicky type bark that you hear. And all of a sudden they heard this crash. With this couple of 100-pound huge mirror somehow went halfway across the room and just shattered into thousands of pieces. So apparently whatever was there either had a lot of negativity and a lot of anger, or maybe it wasn't human. I don't know. I never really wanted to find out. Now, the activity really seemed to escalate after the grandchildren started showing up, like my cousins, my brother, and myself. Now, when we were babies. Now, when my second cousin was there, this is the next really horrifying thing. I was just a baby, so I don't actually remember this, but I've been told this by every family member that was there. She was walking in from the living room to the dining room through the archway. Well, she stopped and she started, like, she couldn't breathe. Something had its like hands around her throat, and as everybody said, they actually saw her lift up 2 inches off the ground. It probably for about 10-15 seconds, and then it dropped. And of course, this is my second cousin. She ran out of the house, and she never stepped foot back in that house ever again the rest of her life. I don't blame her. I probably wouldn't either. Now, another thing that happened, it kind of happened to me. I was only a baby, but my mom told me about this. They had a bassinet upstairs in the front bedroom, and when I would visit there, that was my cousin's room. Well, apparently they had me downstairs. They heard a loud crash upstairs, and the bassinet, when it was across the room and upside down. So, like I said, this, whatever it was, really didn't like children, and I'm just grateful that I wasn't actually in the bassinet when this happened. Now, this next story happened to my mother. Let me tell you something about my mother. She's a very level-headed woman, very logical, very scientific. She wants to know the ins and outs of things, and she never did scare easily. She was coming out of the bathroom one day, and she said she felt really, really like this cold feeling, and then like eyes were just staring at her. Well, she looked down, and at the bedroom on the right, all the way down, standing in the doorway, was this full body apparition of a man, very tall, very big, and looked like work clothes, work boots, and was just staring at her. Well, with my mother the way she is, she didn't just start running and screaming. She walked a few steps and kept looking at it. She walked a few more steps, looked at it again. She was trying to get up from all angles. She got partly down the steps, and the whole time this thing was watching her. And I think at one point it kind of kicked in, I guess, that fight or flight thing where she's like, okay, this thing's real, what am I doing? And then she ran down the stairs. My dad had a small experience. He loved to read. He was sitting in the living room. There was a lamp right next to him, one of those that you actually had to turn the switch that looked like a key. It kept turning on, and he could actually hear it clicking, and it kept moving. And he actually watched it move, and it kept turning off the lights on him. So finally he said out loud, because my dad was kind of a no-nonsense person either, he said, okay, if you don't want the light on, I'm not going to have it on. So he just shut his book and walked into the other room. And then my aunt and uncle, my dad's brother, had one experience where they pulled out front. It was street parking. They looked up and they saw a woman standing in the second floor looking out at the end of the hallway's window. So they walked in, so they had a key, and they were yelling for my grandmother because it was like a white-haired woman, and apparently there was nobody there. So it wasn't my grandmother that they saw. Okay, right now we're going to take a little break, and then when we come back, I'm going to tell you about my experience. And plus a couple of funny things that happened in that house. It wasn't just all, terrifying, but it was based on the whole, haunting. Loosely. Okay, welcome back. Now we're going to talk about what happened to me. Besides seeing the rocking chair, hearing the footsteps, It was the rotary phone that would dial itself. I think I was about 10 or 11 years old. And my grandparents had set up one of those little swimming pools in the back that you could set up and break down. And I was out there with my cousins, and they sent me in to get some towels. Now, this was July. It was probably like 96 degrees outside. Of course, my grandparents didn't have central air conditioning, so in the house it was very hot, especially upstairs. Now I walked up. Remember that wardrobe I was telling you about? Down the hallway to the left in the little alcove. That's where my grandmother kept the towels. Well, I opened up the doors, and I got a few towels. When all of a sudden it felt like it must have dropped, about 50 degrees. All of a sudden the air was like frigid. And all of a sudden I felt this pressure on my right shoulder. And it started getting painful, like somebody had grabbed me. Well, I was trying to jerk, and I turned around. I could still feel the pressure, and there was nobody there. So finally, I jerked free. I threw the towels up in the air. The hell with the towels. I'm out of there. Ran out there, ran outside. And for a few days after that, I had actually light bruising on my shoulder. There was 4 stripes on the front and 1 on the back, as if there was actually a hand on my shoulder. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. I always hated that house. My grandparents actually took care of us in the summer. I didn't have a choice of going back in there. But it got to the point that, and my youngest cousin, when she would stay, neither one of us, we would go to the bathroom together. We wouldn't even go upstairs by ourselves at all. So, and it's interesting because I went back there. This was, I'm 45 now, so this is like 30 years ago. About 5-6 years ago, I drove by there. My grandparents had moved out when I was like, I think 17 years old. Finally. I drove by there. I didn't know that there had been a fire. But the cinder blocks are still standing. You can see like where the fire had scorched around the windows and doors where it's boarded up. And it still gave me the creeps looking at it. I didn't even want to be on the same street as that house. And I don't know how the cause of it. I never really found out what caused the fire. But I did want to share there was a couple of funny stories that had to do with that house. One of them this was shortly after I think my parents were married. This was after the mirror incident and all that. My mom was in my grandfather's room that was across from the bathroom. Well, it was old house, old wiring. She plugged in the hair dryer. Well, it blew the fuses. And so, of course, even though she's level-headed, she doesn't like to be like that in the dark. So she ran up and screeched down the hall, down the stairs, and went to the kitchen. Well, what she didn't know was that my uncle was taking a bath. And right at the time that he opened up the door, after the lights went out, in the darkness, all he saw was her long, light-colored nightgown was floating down the hallway in this horrible screeching. So he comes down into the kitchen, buck naked, with only a washcloth to cover him up. So, and then the second one, my great-grandmother's boyfriend, companion, was over. And then my grandmother, great-aunt, and my great-grandmother decided they were going to perform an exorcism of the house. So they were walking around reading the Bible in each of the rooms. Well, when they went upstairs and they went to the bedroom that was directly above the kitchen, well, this old man had a sick sense of humor. So he took a broom handle, hit the ceiling a few times, and they came running down, and they wouldn't go back upstairs, even though he explained that it was him, and he was, falling on the floor laughing. So those are experiences in my grandmother's house. I have a lot more to share, because, like I said, I seem to be a ghost magnet, and I've had things happen to me all my life. I also am going to have a segment starting next week called Gateways to Hell, and I'm going to be talking about historical, literal gateways to the underworld, as well as really big hot spots around the world that people could almost say that they're living in hell, or the visitors may think that it's a portal to hell. I want your stories in the links below. Please give me your stories so I can share them with the world. And also, if you can please like my Facebook page, and if you're interested, they also have a Patreon. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next week. Bye bye now.